Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So before we break down some very important information that I have to share with you today about a speech that Putin just gave and what the implications are for the world, we need to just clear the air about some things, because there's a lot of people who presume that because we try to view this war objectively, that we are somehow tacitly endorsing authoritarian regimes, and that our lack of constant denunciation of the Kremlin and what they're doing in Ukraine is somehow our endorsement of those things. And nothing could be further from the truth. Okay, if I had to choose between living here and living there, I would choose living here, because as the saying goes, democracy is a terrible system, but it's the best thing we got. Okay, now in terms of the blatant and obvious encroachment by NATO onto Russian territory, which has been occurring over the last couple decades, that's clearly undeniable. I mean, anybody with half a brain can see that. And if you cannot conceptualize why that's a national security risk for the Russians in light of their history, particularly, which is going to be celebrated tomorrow, surrounding the events of World War II, then again, I suggest you take up another hobby, because your purview of this situation is not broad enough to comprehend it in any significant detail. So we do not in any way, shape, or form condone the atrocities of the Kremlin as they pertain to Ukraine. However, we do understand the broader geopolitical, historical context that these events are occurring in. And as such, as a prepper in particular, we need to try to view these things as objectively as possible if we are going to actually have a good understanding of what is going on, and not believing the propaganda of either side. And indeed, there is propaganda on both sides, and that's something that we need to bear in mind. Now, what has Putin said? As some of you know, there's going to be a victory parade by the time this video gets released that may be kicking off in Moscow tomorrow. I'm not sure what the time difference is, but a lot of people have suspected that the Kremlin is going to use this day as an opportunity to try to bolster more support for the war, to ratchet it up, and to create a general mobilization, call up more reservists, and declare all-out war on Ukraine. Do I think that's personally going to happen? I don't think a general declaration of all-out war on Ukraine is going to happen, but I'm sure we can definitely see a ratcheting up. I think that we will see the opportunity seized upon to use this as a way to garner more support for the war. Now, Putin released a message today which is indicating that this is the path that they're going to take. Okay, so to commemorate Victory Day, Vladimir Putin blasted the NIZI filth in Ukraine with remarks that he made on May 8th. So a fiery message of determination and escalation was sent by Russian President Vladimir Putin and other Russian officials, directly identifying the war in Ukraine with World War II. Now, what people need to understand, and just to briefly summarize, because I know not a lot of my subscribers are up to speed on all this, the whole demilitarization and denazification idea is, it would be almost like, let's say that you had Al-Qaeda or ISIS infiltrate deep within the Mexican government or something like that. And they were operating within the Mexican government, and they were sending their operatives over the border. Okay, that would be similar in scope in terms of the national security threat that the Russians are viewing this as. I'm not saying that's what it is per se. I'm saying that that's what they're framing this as. And we need to understand at all times that it's very easy for us from across the pond, from the relative safety of our borders, which are two oceans apart from the rest of the world, to criticize what's going on over there when we've never had our country invaded on all fronts, like the Russians have, and especially in one of the bloodiest invasions of all time, which killed 17 million Russians. Okay, when that was when the Nazis invaded. So this has left a mark. So you can call them paranoid or whatever. The fact is, they don't want, and whether you view it as legitimate or not, this is what they view it as. So take it for what it's worth. It's obvious that the Russian political leadership considers that a third world war has begun. The message is not good at all for Ukraine, as President Putin spoke about the liberation of all homelands. So what he's talking about is the old Soviet borders. Russia will go to the end, and the question is, what will be left of Ukraine? Russian President Vladimir Putin has assured that as in 1945, victory will be ours, making a series of comparisons between World War II and the conflict in Ukraine in his wishes for May 8th. Today, our soldiers, he said, like our ancestors, are fighting side by side for the liberation of their homeland from the Nazi filth, believing that, like in 1945, victory will be ours. Putin said, addressed today to the countries of the former Soviet bloc, as well as to the regions of eastern Ukraine, Donetsk, and Lugansk. Today, the common task is to prevent the rebirth of Nazism, which has caused so much suffering to the peoples of different countries, he said, adding that new generations will be worthy of the memory of their fathers and grandfathers. In his wishes, Vladimir Putin referred not only to the soldiers, but also to the citizens of the Internal Front who crushed Nazism with innumerable sacrifices in return. Unfortunately, today, Nazism has reared its head again, the Russian president said, speaking to Ukrainians. It is our duty, our sacred duty, to prevent the ideological heirs of those who have been defeated in what Moscow calls the Great Patriotic War from taking their revenge. The Russian head of state wished a peaceful and just future for all the people of Ukraine. Roscomov's chief Dmitry Rogozin, who is the head of the space agency, recently warned that NATO countries could be quickly destroyed in a nuclear war. In the same Telegram post, however, he urged his country not to wage a nuclear war. Rogozin claimed that the catastrophe could happen in 30 minutes, but we must just not allow it, as the consequences of an exchange of nuclear strikes will affect the state of our Earth, he added. It's been projected that if a nuclear war was to break out within the first half an hour, you'd see the deaths of possibly 200 to 300 million people. And then shortly thereafter that, you'd see the deaths of billions and billions of people. However, there's a lot of unknowns with nuclear war. And some people think that there's going to be billions of people who survive. And that's a scary part, is trying to survive and eke out an existence when the sun has been blacked out and the temperature drops because of nuclear winter and all the hell that is brought with that. So it's making me want to move to the southern hemisphere, to be honest. Anyways, more on that later. What else does he say here? Anyways, we're going to see what is said tomorrow. We're going to see what the vibe is. As I said in a recent video I did, there has been some speculation that they're mobilizing more reservists and that they are trying to create a general mobilization for an all-out war against Ukraine. I can't see that happening officially because, of course, the Kremlin has officially denied that. And usually when they deny something, they're either consistent with that, or they give it another euphemistic term. So maybe they'll call it the broadening of the demilitarization, or the demilitarization of the homeland, they'll call it. And in reference to the broader Soviet bloc or whatever, all the Soviet countries, the Baltic countries, stuff like that, that could be what they refer to. But it's really hard to say. Now, we know that General Wesley Clark was recently quoted as saying that in summer he expects that the fighting is going to ratchet up once again, and that's going to be the definitive moment, so that It's looking like that this war is about to escalate significantly. The United States is sending in weapons. A lot of them are being blown up. A lot of the railways are being intercepted by the Russians. The Russians have made significant advances in the east and the Donbass within the last 24 hours, obliterating large battalions of Ukrainian soldiers. And Ukrainians have made some advances in the Kharkov region. Some people have speculated that's because the Russians have pulled back to redirect those forces elsewhere. There was a skirmish on Snake Island. Nobody knows what the actual outcome of that actually is. But some people have speculated that the Ukrainians tried to retake Snake Island and that they failed in that attempt. But like I say, there's a fog of war. We really don't know what's going on. On the whole, though, the consensus seems to be that the Russians are making progress. It's just slow and it's grinding. And it's not without its share of losses, that's for sure, which is why I think that the Kremlin is going to call for a broadening of the demilitarization campaign. Now, I think the other part of the military parade is to show that, hey, like, even though we're at war with a country, and at war with what essentially amounts to the global superpowers of the world. I mean, Russia is at war with the world, essentially, that we can still stage a military parade, that we still have the resources and the capability to do that while we're fighting a war. I think that's a bit of a power play into itself. So we'll see. We'll see how that's interpreted on the global stage. Now, Mark Fitzpatrick of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, he believes that Russia will keep all options on the table to achieve its military objectives in Ukraine, including the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Now, he says that Putin really does not want to lose, but he's not going to win for sure. This is according to Mark Fitzpatrick, okay? And that's a very bold statement to make, and that's a scary statement because that basically almost ensures that they will use tactical nuclear weapons in an escalate to de-escalate strategy. Ukraine is just fighting back so fiercely and with more and more support from the West, he told Al Jazeera from Washington, D.C. I don't think Putin is going to win, but what does it mean that he can't lose? Does he have to redefine his objectives? And if he's doubling down now and still loses, what happens then? Will he quadruple down and then use nuclear weapons? I'm worried about that. Now, there's been a lot of sensationalism around the use of nuclear weapons. And I think there's scenarios where they could use nuclear weapons and it wouldn't necessarily involve a massive loss of life, or it wouldn't involve the escalation into World War III. So imagine the Russians are losing, okay? And they say, all right, we're going to let one of our strategic nukes fly in an attempt to scare the Ukrainians into submission. Now, would it work? Would the Ukrainians yield to that at all? Nobody knows, okay? It depends, I think, on what the outcome is. I could foresee a situation where they maybe dropped a nuke on a convoy of tanks or something like that, tactical nuke, okay? It would not be, obviously, a good return on your investment compared to how much a tactical nuke costs and, the damage that it would create. But it would cause a little bit of pain on the Ukrainian military, and it would send a message that, hey, we're willing to use nukes. And, now that we've used one, there's not much, we've kind of broken the ice in a sense, and we can use more. And would that necessarily then create a response from NATO in terms of an all-out declaration of war against Russia? I don't think so, because I think, for one, if Russia shows that they're willing to use nukes, I think that almost makes NATO more reticent to jump into the fight, because that means that it's quickly going to escalate into the use of more nuclear weapons. Now, of course, Washington and other NATO officials have talked about that red line, between the CBRN, the use of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons, as being a red line for their involvement. Now, will they honor that is the question. Okay, there's doubts as to whether NATO would even honor Article 5 of the treaty, in that if one of the countries of NATO, one of the member states, the smaller ones, was attacked by the Russians, whether NATO would get involved with the full capacity of their military at all or not. So I think this possibility of using nuclear weapons is there. It's definitely there, and I think it's a last-ditch thing. But as I've said before, so long as Kiev is relatively unscathed and being spared by the bombardment of the air superiority of the Russians in Ukraine and the cruise missiles and the hypersonic missile technology, then I think that the Russians are achieving their objectives, whether slow or otherwise. I think the canary in the coal mine is if they start hitting Kiev hard, that means that they're losing the war. And that's when I think, people will start getting concerned about what they're going to do next. Right now, it appears that they've made some significant advances in the east and the Donbass, and that is going according to plan, as slow as it is. So anyways, yeah. We've got a few other things to talk about here, but I think we'll save that for another installment. Just give you guys a heads up. I'm still a little under the weather. We are getting better, but still in the process of building out our new studio here, and we hope to get back to our regularly scheduled programming as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we're just not equipped right now to do the many videos that we have in queue, but we have a lot of really good stuff coming for you guys. So I encourage you to, be patient with us. And I know a lot of you guys like these daily updates, and but there's a lot of people who like the more applied, actionable content as well. So I promise we'll get back to doing that very soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe. Canadian Prepper out.